Sometimes a news story pops up and it just grabs you, right? Not just the event itself, but everything surrounding it. It's like a puzzle with missing pieces and different people see different pictures.
Yeah.
That's exactly the kind of story we're diving into today. We're talking about Pastor Praveen Pagadala's death. Happened just recently, March 25th, 2025 in Andhra Pradesh.
Yeah, and what really struck me right off the bat was the immediate dissonance between the initial reports and the public reaction that followed. Like two totally different threads weaving through this story, and both are really weighty.
Exactly. That's a lot to unpack. We've been looking into it, poring over the early news coverage, community statements, everything that came out in those first couple of days, those really intense 48 hours.
Makes sense.
What we really want to do is try to understand what we actually know, what the facts are.
Yeah.
Why are there these completely different perspectives on what happened, and what are the big questions that need answering?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's just start with the basics, right?
Mm.
Who was Pastor Praveen Pagadala? What do we know about him?
So from what I've gathered, he seems to have been a really influential figure, not just locally, but kind of reaching beyond his immediate community. He was in his mid-40s, some reports say 45, others 46.
Right.
Based in Hyderabad, SBI colony near Tirumala, to be precise. But his reach was far wider than that.
Yeah, his influence wasn't limited to, like, a Sunday service. This guy had a serious platform. His sermons, they were broadcast on Calvary TV. That's a satellite channel with a massive audience.
Huge.
And on top of that, he was very active on social media, like really connecting with people online. In today's world, that's how you make an impact.
Definitely, no doubt about it. And it seems like he really did use these platforms to become a leading voice, especially in the evangelical community, not just within India, but on the global stage.
Right. I saw that too. Some were calling him a noted international Christian preacher. That's a pretty big deal. But it wasn't just the size of his audience, right? It was what he was talking about that really seemed to resonate. Maybe even cause some friction, too.
Oh, absolutely. The content matters as much as the reach.
So he was known for being this really active, evangelist, sharing his faith. But also, he was engaging with intellectual arguments, defending his beliefs. He was what you'd call an apologist. And a lot of what he was talking about involves some pretty complex social and theological stuff.
Yeah, and it's interesting, because he was willing to directly address things like the caste and Varna systems, specifically how they're portrayed in Hindu scriptures. I even saw a mention of a video from 2020 on Simply Hindu that highlighted his approach. It wasn't necessarily about conflict, but it was a direct engagement with really sensitive topics.
Yeah, and anyone who follows those kinds of conversations knows they can get really heated, especially in the context of what we're talking about now, because there were reports that Pastor Pagadala had been receiving threats in the months before he died, even a social media post that hinted at him feeling like he might be in danger.
Right, right. And that context, those threats, it adds a whole other layer to this because it makes you look at everything that happened on March 25th in a different light.
It really does.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that day. What do we know about what happened?
The official police account puts his death in the early hours of Tuesday, March 25th. On National Highway 16, near a village called Kanthamuru, that's close to Rajahmundry, in the East Godavari district.
Right.
And the timeline suggests he left Hyderabad on his Royal Enfield Bullet motorcycle the evening before. On Monday, March 24th, it seems he was heading to Christian conventions in either Chagalu or Rajahmundry.
That's a pretty long trip on a bike.
It is. And according to the Rajanagaram police who are leading the investigation on this, the accident happened on the Godavari 4th Bridge around midnight. The initial assessment from Inspector Viraya Gaud is that his motorcycle skidded, causing him to fall, and the bike ended up landing on top of him.
It's just awful. And we also have information from the East Godavari Superintendent of Police, D. Narasimha Kishore. He mentioned that Pastor Pagadala's last phone call was to a guy named Ram Mohan in Rajahmundry. It was Ram Mohan who ended up identifying the body.
Yeah.
So there's this really personal element to it all as well.
Absolutely. There always is in cases like this. And the police have even given us a possible explanation for what caused the skid. They're saying it could have been dust kicked up by a lorry in a car that Pastor Pagadala was trying to overtake.
Oh, like he was passing them.
Right. And they're trying to locate those vehicles to see if their accounts match up.
Makes sense. So in the aftermath, the police registered a case under Section 174 of the Criminal Procedure Code based on a complaint from Pastor Pagadala's family. I should probably clarify that for anyone listening who isn't familiar with Indian law. Section 174 is the standard procedure for investigating deaths that, well, seem unnatural, where the cause isn't immediately obvious.
Right, just procedure.
So that's the official account as we have it now, but it's not exactly been met with universal acceptance. In fact, there's been a huge amount of skepticism.
And rightfully so. I mean, almost right away, people who knew him, his supporters, they started voicing their concerns. And one of the biggest things they're pointing to is the condition of the motorcycle. The bike and his helmet, they didn't have the kind of damage you'd expect from an accident like that, especially one where the bike ended up on top of him. It's hard to ignore that kind of visual discrepancy.
No, it really is. Because if the bike and the helmet are largely intact, you can't help but question how hard the impact really was.
Yeah.
And then there were the reports that there weren't even any skid marks at the scene, or debris. You'd expect to see that if a motorcycle had crashed the way they're saying. Those details can really make people suspicious when they don't line up.
Absolutely. And these inconsistencies are what's fueling the speculation, even outright accusations that this wasn't an accident at all. We even have YS Sharmila, the Andhra Pradesh Congress chief, publicly stating that she believes it was a meticulously planned murder. I mean, that's a pretty strong statement.
It's not something you say lightly.
Yeah.
And the public reaction has been intense. The day after his death, on March 26th, hundreds of people, pastors, members of the Christian community, even Dalit organizations, gathered outside Rajahmundry Government General Hospital.
I can only imagine what that must have been like.
I know, it must have been incredibly charged.
And what were they asking for? What was the main demand?
A video-recorded post-mortem examination. They want everything documented. It's clearly about a lack of trust in those initial findings, wanting full transparency in the investigation.
Makes sense.
And it got even more intense. There were reports of people trying to block the ambulance carrying his body. It actually led to the police having to intervene. That's how deeply people are feeling about this. They're angry, they're upset, and they really feel like something's not right.
It's a raw, visceral reaction. You can't ignore that. And then, on the 27th, the focus shifted to Secunderabad. His body was brought to the Centenary Baptist Church so people could pay their respects. Large crowds again, and same demand for a thorough and impartial investigation.
Right, and we're seeing this from organizations like the National Christian Council and the Telangana Christian JC.
Yeah.
People like M. Raji Sagar are speaking out, calling his death suspicious. They're pointing to what they say are injuries on his body that are more consistent with blunt force trauma, not a motorcycle accident. Those details really feed into the idea that there was foul play.
Right. It all adds up.
And then there's the criticism of the police. People are saying they took too long to file a formal case. That can really erode trust, even if there's a reason for it. The community feels like they're not being taken seriously.
Of course. And it's not just about this specific incident. People are expressing these wider concerns about safety, especially for minorities in the region. Some are even drawing a link to the murder of advocate Israel in Hyderabad not that long ago. They're saying there's a pattern here.
Yeah, it definitely adds to the tension, to the sensitivity surrounding this whole thing. People aren't going to just accept the road accident explanation without clear, definitive proof. They want answers.
It's understandable, given everything.
So this huge public outcry has gotten the attention of those in charge. On March 26th, Chief Minister N. Chandrababu Naidu stepped in and ordered a thorough investigation from all angles. He even specifically directed the Director General of Police, Harish Kumar Gupta, to oversee it personally. That shows how seriously they're taking this now.
Right. It's a high-level intervention.
And after that, they formed a special investigation team. 3 people, specifically to look into this. They're doing forensic analysis of the CCTV footage, any other evidence they can find. The Home Minister, Anita, she also made a statement, emphasizing the government's commitment to a proper, unbiased inquiry.
So it seems like they're really trying to assure people that this will be taken seriously.
Yeah, they're definitely aware of how much attention this is getting. Even IT Minister Nara Lokesh offered his condolences. And he did mention the preliminary findings, the road accident theory, but he also acknowledged the doubts, the need for a complete investigation to address those concerns.
And it's not just the people in power, right? We're seeing reactions from across the political spectrum.
Right, absolutely. YSRCP Chief YS Jagan Mohan Reddy called it deeply saddening and also called for an impartial inquiry. So there's this agreement, at least publicly, that a proper investigation needs to happen.
It seems so.
And we've already talked about YS Sharmila from the Congress Party. Her statement about a meticulously planned murder. It's really charged. This whole situation has become so politically sensitive. It's not just a simple accident anymore.
It goes way beyond that. You've got the communal aspects, the political dimensions with everyone who's involved, and then the legal side of things. What happens next will depend on what the investigation finds.
Right. So taking everything we know up to March 27th, 2025, we see these two very different explanations emerging. And it's important to remember all of this is based on the early information, those initial reports and reactions. The investigation is still going on.
Absolutely.
So the first explanation, obviously, is the tragic accident. The police are saying he probably lost control of the bike, maybe because of dust or the road conditions, and crashed.
Right. And the initial evidence for this, it comes from that CCTV footage. They're saying it shows a skid mark. And there weren't any eyewitnesses who said they saw another vehicle directly causing the crash. But the big issue that a lot of people have is the condition of the bike. It just doesn't look like it was in a fatal accident.
No, and that's hard to get past.
Yeah.
Then you have the other theory, the foul play. This is what his friends, followers, people in the community are really clinging to. They believe he was targeted because of his views, his influence.
And their arguments do make you think. They point to the bike and the helmet, both relatively undamaged, the threats he received, and the injuries that they're saying don't look like a typical motorcycle accident. The idea, though there's no hard evidence for it yet, is that the crash might have been staged somehow.
And that leads us to some really big unanswered questions that I'm sure everyone listening is thinking about right now. Like, why does the motorcycle look the way it does? That's a huge point of contention.
It's the thing people keep coming back to.
And then there's the question of what actually caused the skid. If it was dust from other vehicles, where are those vehicles? Why haven't we heard from the drivers, or why haven't the police found them yet? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's strange.
And the threats he got before, were they real? Did the police ever look into them? Could they be connected to his death? These are all things that need to be investigated. And ultimately, what will the forensic analysis show? What about the post-mortem? Those are the missing pieces.
Right, that's what we're all waiting for. As of now, March 27th, the investigation is still ongoing. The police have said they'll give more updates once they have those forensic reports, when they have a clearer picture of what actually happened.
Right.
And Pastor Pagadala's body was given to his family yesterday, the 26th. His funeral is going to be a huge event, I imagine. It'll bring even more attention to this whole situation.
And unfortunately, it's already created a lot of tension in Andhra Pradesh. There are demands for justice from the Christian community, from groups who were close to him. And at the same time, you have people calling for calm, asking everyone to avoid letting this become a bigger communal issue.
It's a very delicate situation.
It really is. And it's become a test for the authorities, for their transparency, their accountability. The answers to these questions, they're going to have a huge impact on how much people trust the investigation, how people talk about faith and community and safety in the region.
It's a pivotal moment.
So we've got these two very different narratives. The official story of a tragic accident, and then the belief that something more sinister happened. And it all comes down to those unanswered questions. That's what's creating all this uncertainty, all this emotion.
It makes you think, what happens if the police are right? What will the community do? Especially with all the distrust that's already there. And what if it turns out there was foul play? What does that mean for everyone? It's a huge deal.
This is a situation that needs to be watched carefully. And regardless of what the investigation finds, it shows us how complicated these things are. Faith, influence, the need for trust in how these kinds of events are handled. This case forces us to look deeper beyond the surface.
It's a stark reminder.
It really is. It makes you realize that every story has so many layers, so many things we might not see right away.
Absolutely. And that's why we need to keep asking questions.
Exactly.
Until we get to the truth.
To the truth. Well said.